At exactly 12:17 on a bright Saturday afternoon, Marissa Vale sat alone at a small corner table in a crowded cafe, staring at an empty chair that had already humiliated her more than anyone could imagine. She had been told it was a harmless blind date, a little surprise arranged by her friends, something to make her smile after months of feeling invisible. What she didn't know was that the entire thing had started as a joke. Her friends were waiting nearby, secretly watching and laughing, expecting an awkward stranger to arrive and give them something funny to talk about later. But when the man finally walked through the cafe doors, carrying a worn leather notebook and looking around with quiet uncertainty, nobody could have guessed that this ridiculous joke would become the moment that changed Marissa's life forever. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness can give someone a second chance and that one unexpected moment can change a person's entire life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to Epic Story Hub. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to you. Marissa was 29 years old and had become very good at pretending that she was okay. During the day, she worked at a small community library where she helped children discover books, assisted elderly visitors with computers, and quietly recommended stories to people who came in looking for an escape from their own lives. She smiled often, but very few people knew how much effort that smile required. 3 years earlier, her mother had passed away after a long illness, and less than a year later, Marissa had lost the job she loved when the publishing company she worked for closed its local office. The relationship she had believed would become a marriage had ended soon after that. One loss had followed another until she began wondering whether life was simply teaching her not to expect anything good. Her closest friends, Talia and Brielle, worried about her. They had watched Marissa turn down invitations, stop celebrating birthdays, and spend most weekends alone. They wanted to help, but instead of choosing kindness, they chose something foolish. One afternoon, they secretly created a dating profile for Marissa and arranged a blind date with a man they had never actually met in person. They told Marissa that a friend of a friend was interested in meeting her and that she should simply give it a chance. When she hesitated, they teased her until she agreed. What Marissa didn't know was that Talia and Brielle had placed a tiny phone on a nearby table so they could watch the date from a distance. They expected an amusing afternoon. They never expected to witness something unforgettable. At 12:17, the stranger entered the cafe. His name was Everett Rowan. He was 34, dressed simply in a light blue shirt and dark trousers, with an old watch on his wrist and a leather notebook tucked beneath his arm. He looked nervous. He checked the name on his phone twice before approaching Marissa's table. The moment she realized he was the man she had been waiting for, she felt a strange mixture of embarrassment and irritation. She had almost stood up and walked away, but something in Everett's expression stopped her. He didn't look confident or amused. He looked just as uncomfortable as she felt. They sat across from each other, and at first the afternoon seemed painfully ordinary. Marissa tried to make small talk while Everett struggled to hide his nervousness. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of asking her the usual questions about her job, hobbies, or favorite movies, Everett noticed the book beside her and asked why she had chosen it. That simple question opened a door. Marissa began talking about stories, childhood memories, and the way books sometimes helped people survive difficult days. Everett listened without interrupting. For the first time in months, Marissa found herself talking about things she genuinely loved instead of pretending everything was fine. Across the cafe, Talia and Brielle were no longer laughing. They had expected Marissa to become uncomfortable and leave within 15 minutes, but an hour passed. Then another. Everett and Marissa were still sitting together. Neither of them knew that the joke had already gone too far because something real had begun happening between them. Everett eventually confessed that he had almost cancelled the date because he had never been good at meeting strangers. Marissa smiled and admitted that she had almost cancelled too. They laughed, and for a few seconds, the sadness that had followed Marissa for years seemed to disappear. Then Everett noticed something that changed the entire afternoon. A little boy near the cafe entrance was crying while his mother frantically searched through her bag. The child had lost his favorite toy, a small stuffed rabbit. Without hesitation, Marissa stood up and helped him search. Everett joined her. They checked under chairs, near the counter, and beside the entrance until Marissa finally spotted the rabbit underneath a bench. The boy hugged it tightly, and his mother thanked them with tears in her eyes. It was such a small moment, but Everett watched Marissa carefully. He saw the way her face softened when she realized the child was no longer crying. She had been hurting for years, yet she still noticed other people's pain. When they returned to their table, Everett quietly told her that she had a beautiful heart. Marissa looked down, embarrassed by the compliment. She had spent so long believing that she was broken that she had forgotten someone could see something beautiful in her. What she didn't know was that Everett had his own reasons for understanding brokenness. A few years earlier, he had lost his younger sister in a tragic accident. Afterward, he had stopped making plans for the future. He had buried himself in work, carried his grief quietly, and convinced himself that loneliness was easier than risking another loss. The afternoon slowly turned into evening, although neither of them noticed the time passing. Eventually, Everett opened his leather notebook and showed Marissa several pages filled with handwritten notes. He explained that he wrote down one good thing every day, even on days when finding something good felt impossible. Some entries were simple, like sunlight through a window or a stranger holding a door open. Others were more meaningful. He said the habit had helped him understand that a painful life could still contain beautiful moments. Marissa stared at the notebook and realized that she had been searching for one huge reason to be happy when perhaps happiness sometimes arrived in tiny pieces. When the date ended, neither of them made dramatic promises. They simply exchanged numbers and said they would talk again. Marissa walked home beneath a golden afternoon sky, feeling something she had not felt in a long time, hope. She didn't know whether Everett would become important to her. She didn't know whether they would ever fall in love. But for the first time in years, she was curious about tomorrow. The next morning, Marissa received a message from Talia asking if she had enjoyed the joke. Confused, Marissa called her. Within minutes, the truth came out. The blind date had been arranged for fun. Talia and Brielle had been watching from another table, expecting to laugh at Marissa's awkward experience. The hidden phone, the fake dating profile, the jokes they had made beforehand, everything was revealed. Marissa felt her heart sink. The happiness she had carried home suddenly became mixed with embarrassment. She felt betrayed, not because the date had been terrible, but because something that had felt sincere had begun as entertainment for people she trusted. She stopped answering their calls. For several days, she stayed away from the cafe where she had met Everett. She wondered whether he had known about the joke too. Then, one sunny afternoon, Everett appeared at the library. He walked toward the desk carrying the same leather notebook. Marissa froze. She almost turned away, but Everett simply stood there and waited. He had learned the truth from Talia and Brielle, but he had also learned something else. He knew Marissa had been hurt, and he wanted her to know that whatever had started as a joke had become real to him. He told her that the first date might have been a joke to other people, but the hours they spent together were not. He said he remembered the little boy with the stuffed rabbit, the way Marissa had smiled, the stories she had told, and the courage it had taken for her to sit at that table when she was already carrying so much pain. He didn't promise that life would suddenly become easy. He simply reminded her that one cruel beginning did not have to determine the ending. Marissa cried that day, not because she was broken, but because someone had finally reminded her that she still had reasons to hope. She realized that life was strange. Sometimes the most beautiful chapters began in the most embarrassing circumstances. Sometimes people entered our lives through doors we never intended to open. And sometimes a second chance arrived disguised as something we almost walked away from. Months passed. Marissa and Everett slowly became part of each other's lives. They spent afternoons walking through the city, visiting bookstores, helping at the community center, and writing small moments of gratitude in Everett's notebook. Marissa eventually started a reading program at the library for children who struggled at home, inspired by the belief that every child deserved a safe place to dream. Everett began volunteering there too. One bright Saturday afternoon, almost exactly a year after their first meeting, Marissa returned to the same cafe. This time, there was no hidden phone, no secret audience, and no cruel joke. Everett sat across from her with 2 cups of coffee and his old notebook. He turned to a fresh page and wrote something before closing it. Marissa asked what he had written, and he smiled before showing her the page. It contained only one sentence: "The best thing that ever happened to me began as something neither of us wanted." Marissa smiled through tears. She finally understood that her life had not changed because she met the perfect man. It changed because she finally learned something much more important. Being hurt did not mean she was finished, being alone did not mean she was forgotten, and a painful past did not have the power to decide her future. Sometimes life breaks our plans because it is preparing us for a different story. Sometimes the person who enters our life unexpectedly becomes the person who teaches us how to believe again. And sometimes, what begins as a joke can become a second chance that neither person ever knew they needed. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who may need a little hope, and subscribe to Epic Story Hub. Your simple support can help this story reach someone who is quietly struggling today and needs to hear that their story is not over. And before the story ends, write "I believe in second chances red heart" in the comments. Let those words be a reminder to anyone reading them that no matter how difficult life has been, tomorrow can still hold something beautiful. Because sometimes, the moment we think is the end of our story is actually the moment the best chapter is about to begin.